Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to a new series of Tanya classes, Love, Fear and Compassion. We're going to discuss arousing emotion in our spiritual life, particularly these three emotions, love, fear and compassion. Of those three emotions, two of them are rather popular, one of them not. Love is all the rage. It's been in fashion for a long time now, and we're into that one. Compassion has made a big comeback, and people are very into compassion today. Fear, however, not so much. It's not considered a positive word and a good emotion. In fact, on the contrary, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We don't want fear. To have love, to have compassion, wonderful. To have fear, to encourage fear, to instill fear, to be fearful, are all terrible things. However, what we're going to have a look at this evening, delving into chapter 41 of Tanya, is the comeback of fear and its importance. Bring back that fearing feeling. It actually has a very important role to play. Now, admittedly, perhaps the music industry would not have been all that successful if it had based much of its songs on that theme of fear. However, on a deeper level, when we appreciate what fear really is, its true identity, where it really comes from, we'll see that not only is it useful, but it's central, and in some ways surpasses love and is more important than love in our spiritual lives. And as we speak about our spiritual lives, which is our relationship with God, we can always compare that with our lives down here in this world, our relationship with fellow human beings, because there's a reflection in our relationship with God and our reflection with our fellow, and our relationship with our fellow. And everything we say about our relationship with God can be applied to our relationship with a fellow human being on some level, in its correct context. And so we can learn from one to the other. The ideals of the relationship with God can teach us what an ideal relationship is with another human being. And the experiences we have in our relationships with other human beings can give us insight into how we can better relate to God as well. And so when we discuss the attribute of fear, we're going to see not only how important it is in our relationship with God, but also how central it is in our relationship with our fellow human beings. So let us enter into chapter 41. Chapter 41 begins with the following. Always remember that the emotion that forms the basis, the core, and the foundation of all our spiritual work, the emotion that is the basis, the core, and the foundation of all our spiritual work, we always must remember is... I gave it away. we had, without the introduction, we would have hoped to hear that love is the foundation of everything. That's what all the poetry tells us. But Tanya says it's yira. And yira we translate as fear. That's the Hebrew word that is translated literally as fear. It could also be translated as awe. It could be respect. And the translation is important because any translation is an interpretation. It's not just a translation. Anytime you take from one language to another, you are shaping it, shaping the word. It's not the same. Everything loses something in translation. And this word, perhaps more than most, does lose something. The word fear, if we only look at it in the way we understand fear, then we do lose something. However, what we're going to see is even the fear that we call fear, not awe and not respect, but fear, is also included in the word yira. And essentially, they do come from the same place. What's the difference? I mean, I've used these three words. You can maybe think of others. But what's the difference in our language between fear, awe, and respect? What does it mean to fear someone or something? To be in awe of someone or to respect someone? How are they different? And how are they similar that they can all be encompassed by one word in Hebrew, yira? What does it mean to fear? Be scared of. And that means, what are we scared of? Consequences. Pain, the unknown. So being scared, the experience of being scared is the experience of Ignorance. Is it always ignorance?
It's very much it's centered on the self. When you have awe for someone or something, you can look to the other. So it's not just the self, existential.
Okay, so that's interesting. Fear is centered on self. I'm worried about what's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Or is
regard for
I'm taken by
something else,
someone or something else.
Different direction.
Fear is the fear of the consequence. Something's going to happen to me. Or takes out that sense.
Or has sort of humility in it.
Yep. And respect.
Has maybe more of an acceptance of the situation. It's almost fear, you almost physical, like this awe, there's almost an outlooking, a physical thing as well, is the way I see it.
Yeah.
Of wonder.
It is almost more a reaction, whereas with respect there's a level of understanding.
Acceptance.
So are they all emotions? Any of them emotions? Which one are emotions? Which are not? Fear is an emotion. I'm scared of something. That's an emotional reaction to it. Being in awe of something, is that an emotion?
It is emotive.
Awestruck, yeah. And respect, being respectful of, having respect towards. Where does that come? Where does that appear in our experience? Is that an emotional experience?
Respect can be a decision sometimes.
Meaning that it's more in the mind?
Yeah, you can decide to respect something just because you choose to. It's not just a decision.
So we're saying that there's more me in the fear, less me in the awe. And in the respect?
Knowledge for respect, knowledge of something. Fear is just like primal. You don't have to know anything. You can be totally ignorant and yet you can be very fearful.
And biologically, yeah. Biological reaction.
Yep. Whereas a respect is a much more conscious. And so, is there a commonality between these three? Like, is there a common denominator, a thread? Is there something we could say that all these three are related?
Probably self-nullification. It seems to be basically
Self-nullification. Symptom, contracting self. Okay, let's see how. In fear, the self-nullification in fear is I'm terrified, like I feel like a nothing. In awe, I'm knocked over by the power. And respect, How's respect self-nullifying? Is it?
You still put yourself either on the same level or below wherever you're respecting.
Right, respecting is seeing somebody else as having a position, having an importance, having significance.
An acceptance of a balance.
Mm-hmm.
You agree to disagree is part of respect.
Yeah.
They're also all very self-affirming because they're all in relation to, like, all those words to me are like, they require you in the picture
Mm-hmm.
to respect something or to be in awe. It's because you're something else or
Right.
something in that picture.
Right. So it's interesting in Hasidic writing, to define something as being an emotion means that it is a relating experience, that it's relating to somebody or something outside of you. And so there needs to be you and there needs to be them. That an emotion is not a self-contained experience. There has to be, it's a reaction or an interaction with something else. So there's a you and there's a them. And so in all three of these can be described as different levels or types of emotion. Maybe when we use the word emotion, we mean somebody being emotional. So somebody who has fear is being emotional. Somebody who has respect is not being emotional. That could be being very level-headed. But on a deeper base, on a deeper level, what we're talking about here is an interrelationship with the other. And so all three of these, whether you're acting out of fear, as we understand it, being scared, or being in awe, or respecting, all three of these would be called emotions or midot in Hasidic parlance. And the word yira encompasses all three. And in fact, we only use that word, yira, to encompass all three. Whether you're talking about behaving with respect to somebody, so when it says respect your father and mother, it uses the word yira. Or respect for elders, or respect for sages. The word yira or mora is used. When we talk about being in awe of God, surely that doesn't mean being scared of Him, that He's out to get you, or that He's a big boogie monster. That's not the concept of yira, of being in awe of God. That's not that type of fear. It's an awe that we would use in English. But when we talk also in the Hebrew language, when you speak about being scared of the dark, or of dragons, or of a creepy person down the street in a dark alley, you use the word yira as well. The same word is used for all three. Which means that somehow all three come from the same root. They're different expressions of the same thing. Which, again, in our language, in English language, it's very puzzling. And for that reason, the idea of fear of God, of fear of heaven, the idea of fear only has a negative connotation, or less so, and respect is a respectable word. But as we study into these translations of this one word, we'll see that the real meaning of yira is all three, and it's not negative in that it's not a bad emotion when it's placed correctly. So let's continue and see how Rabbi Shneur Zalman expands this idea. That he's said a very important line here, that the basis, the foundation, the core of our spiritual work is fear, not love, is fear. How so? So he says, although fear is the drive to avoid evil, and love drives us to do good, nevertheless, it is not enough to awaken love alone to do good. Okay, he says here, there's an axiom here that is mentioned previously in Tanya as well, that fear and love have two different functions in our moral life. Fear is the drive to avoid evil. Love is the drive to do good. Do good and avoid evil. These are two moral imperatives. In the book of Psalms, King David says, Sur merav aseh tov, avoid evil and do good. Meaning it's not enough to do good, you have to also avoid evil. It's not enough to avoid evil, you have to do good. Right? So when somebody says that, I'm a good person because I don't hurt anybody, or the definition of a good person is somebody who just minds their own business and doesn't harm anybody else, no, that's not a good person. That's a non-bad person. That's not yet a good person. If he didn't hurt anybody today, I didn't hurt anybody today. Why? Because I didn't do anything today. I stayed locked in my room, so I didn't hurt anybody. Or I didn't say anything to anyone, so I haven't hurt anybody today. For some people, that's a great day. That's very successful for some, but that's not yet a good person. A good person is somebody who's actually doing good, who's bringing goodness to the world around them. And so avoiding evil is not enough. You have to actually do good. On the other hand, doing good is not enough either. You have to avoid evil, which means that you have to sometimes stop yourself from doing something that's inappropriate. You have to sometimes hold back from saying or doing something that will be hurtful, immoral, or wrong. And so all the good you do doesn't cancel the bad that you do. The bad that you do doesn't cancel the good you do. It's not enough to do one or the other. We have to avoid evil and do good. How do we do that? What's the drive? What's the impetus? What's the inspiring force behind doing good and avoiding evil? What will make us do good is love. Tanya said earlier that we only do good for somebody because we have some love for them. We give out of love. We help out of love. We are generous out of love. And so love will inspire goodness. When you love a person, you'll do good for them. And that love, we're not talking about passionate love here. We're talking about all the various grades of love. When you have the basic care for another human being, you love that person, that's a form of love, that's a level of love, and therefore you will do good. When you love God, you want to do what makes him happy. Because that's what happens when you love someone, you want to do what makes them happy. So the drive to do a mitzvah, to do a good deed, is love. But the drive to not do a bad deed, to hold yourself back from not doing something that you're not allowed to do, that you shouldn't be doing, love is not good enough for that. For that you need fear. You need fear. Because what's going to stop you from doing something that is going to feel good even though it's not good? What's going to stop you from doing that which is gratifying but it's inappropriate, it's immoral, it's not fair, it's not right? There has to be a sense of fear that I don't want to do the wrong thing. Now fear can come in many levels. What are you fearing of? On the very basest, lowest level is fearing consequences, like I mentioned earlier. That on the most basic level, why are you not doing what you want to do? Why wouldn't you do something that you want to do? Giving an example of a child, that a child sees the lollies in the cupboard, could reach up and get them, but was told not to, that you're not allowed to. But the parent who told them not allowed to is now in the other room. So why wouldn't they get the lollies? Why wouldn't they? A child loves lollies. And they're right there. You can see what I deal with. So why wouldn't that child get the lollies when the parent is not there? When the parent's there and said you're not allowed, that's one thing. But when the parent's not there, why would they avoid it? What would stop them? So when the parent's there, what's stopping them? It's fear. Not necessarily fear of getting hurt. We're not talking about a parent that would do anything horrible, We're talking about just the authority of the parent. I said no, so don't do it. It could be fear of the punishment that you're going to get, or it could be fear of the dissatisfaction that the parent will display. But that's fear. And when the parent leaves the room, what will stop that child from taking the lolly? Anything? Or will they just take it?
It's the same fear.
But the parents aren't not there. If the parent's there, so then what? So what could? But if the parent's not there,
Fear of getting caught.
in case the parent walks back in and sees,
Or the remnants.
right, there's evidence.
Or some very effective parent who's got this great power over the child, and the child's in awe of them, and it has an innate understanding of the has an innate understanding of their position. in
Right.
protecting them.
So you can see that it will depend on what age and stage of development this child is. There's a certain stage of development where they're going to go and get the lolly. Like when they were told not to, they won't while the parent is on top of them, and as soon as the parent leaves, they'll go and get it. It'll be predictable, like that's expected at a certain stage, that's what a kid's going to do. They haven't yet experienced that guilt, so they'll have, chocolate all over their face, and you'll say, "Did you take the chocolate?" No. And there's no sense of guilt at all. And that's a certain stage which is acceptable and normal for that stage. But then the child will hopefully develop a sense of there's an authority, that the parent is an authority, and saying no is no, and you shouldn't do it. Not just because I'm there, even if I'm not there. And so it'll still be out of a sense of fear. Fear on the basis level could be because punishment. When you take the lollies and I told you not to, so then you have to go to your room, or whatever else the punishment is going to be, and they will fear that. They're scared of getting caught. Or on a deeper level, they're scared of that look of sternness, that my parent, instead of embracing me and smiling to me, has an angry face and is upset at me. There's a fear of that as well, which is very, very powerful when used correctly. That a child wants to be in the good books and wants to feel the love and the closeness, and the fear of losing that is very, very strong and powerful. And so a child will say, I don't want to upset my parent. I don't want to do what they said not to do. That's a type of fear. I'm scared of losing the goodwill, the lovingness. That's also fear. And so without some fear, love will not be enough. As much as a child will love their parent, that is not going to be enough to stop taking that lolly. It has to be a fear of losing the love. There has to be fear there as well. Because love, by its definition, is expansiveness, is loose, is open, is easy, is forgiving. It's not about rules, confinement, self-control, holding back. That's just not what love is. Love is outward, not inward. For the child to control himself, there needs to be an inward force, and that's what fear is. Fear is to hold oneself back. So, although fear is the drive to avoid evil, and love is the drive to do good, that's generally how it works. To do good, you need to love. When you love someone, you do good for them. When you fear losing that love, or you fear the authority of that person, then you don't do what they don't want you to do. You avoid doing the wrong thing. That's generally how it works. Love powers doing good. Fear powers holding back from doing the wrong thing. Nevertheless, it's not enough to awaken love alone to do good. Not only is fear necessary for avoiding evil, but even for doing good, you also need to arouse fear. Love alone is not enough. So while you don't need the love to avoid the evil, that's fear, you need fear as well to arouse doing good, even though you need love as well. You need fear and love. This needs to be explained because, generally speaking, love and fear don't work together. Because they're opposites, they don't really generally work together. Love, as I said, is outwardness, expansiveness. Fear is described in Hasidic writings as kivutz halev, which means a shriveling of the heart. That while love is the heart expanding, opening, being outward, fear is when the heart shrivels up. It goes into it's a minimalized state. It's the exact opposite. So we need love to arouse doing good, but you need fear as well. How are they going to work together? And why do you need fear? Why is love alone not enough? So he explains, you must at least first arouse the natural fear which lies hidden in the heart of every Jew towards God, not to rebel against the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, so that this fear shall manifest itself in your heart, or at least in your mind. You have to arouse this fear. You have to at least the natural fear, which we've spoken several times in Tanya, that there's natural emotions, innate ones, and then there's gained ones that you work on. There's a natural spiritual reflex that we have to do the right thing towards God, and at least that has to be aroused. At least in your mind, if not directly in your heart, to be aware of the fear, even if you don't feel it in your heart. Continues, this means that you should contemplate the greatness of the Infinite One and His authority, which extends to all worlds, both higher and lower, and that He fills all worlds and encompasses all worlds, as is written, do I not fill heaven and earth? Yet He leaves both the higher and lower worlds and uniquely bestows His kingdom upon His people Israel in general and upon you in particular, as indeed each one of us is obliged to say, for my sake was the world created. In these words, Rabbi Shneur Zalman here is giving us a contemplation of the awe that we should feel towards God. Why? Because His greatness, His infinity, He fills all of existence, and He cares about you. He's interested in you, in your behavior, in what you're doing, in where you are. He's looking at you carefully. That while He fills all of the universe, He's an infinite, but infinity means that He's not so big He can't see you. He's so infinite that He's interested in you as well. He's present in your life. He's watching you. This has to be aroused in order to do good. Now, again, this seems at first to not really jive. We said before, to not do the wrong thing, you need an awareness of this authority. But to do the right thing, to do good, it's not so much the authority, it's the closeness, it's the love, it's the intimacy that arouses that. When you love, when you're close to someone, you want to do good for them. When somebody's an authority over you, so then you want to not do the wrong thing. But why do we need that to do the right thing, to do good? Why do we have to arouse this thought in our mind in order to do good? Why wouldn't it be enough to contemplate God's kindness to us? Not His authority over us, but His kindness to us. If you think about all the blessings that you have, the life that you have, that you're alive, that you're here today, that should arouse in you a love for God and therefore a will to do good, to do the right thing, to do that which He has asked you to do. Why do we need to contemplate on the fact that God fills the heavens and the earth, and that includes the place that I'm in right now? He's looking at me, watching over me. He's an authority over me, the King who's authority. Why do we need that? To do good. That's to avoid evil, but to do good. And he says that here, that the idea that God fills heaven and earth, and yet all that He leaves, as it were, to watch you. At this moment, he's interested in you. And for my sake, the world was created. It says in the Talmud that a person should say, the world was created for my sake. Meaning that if I don't do the right thing, then the entire world is affected by it. It all boils down to my actions right here, right now. A person should say that. It's interesting that when the Talmud says that, for my sake the world was created, it sounds like I'm the center of the universe. Rabbi Zalman says, hang on, what the Talmud is trying to say is that the universe is dependent on your actions. If you stuff up, that's going to be bad. That's going to reverberate for the entire universe. That's how a person should feel. Now, if we wouldn't just read these words, but actually meditate on them, contemplate them, like Rabbi Zalman is suggesting here, allowing it to really sink in, that the infinite God who fills all of existence, who's beyond all existence, in heaven and earth, created me and is looking at me and is waiting to see what my next move is. And whatever that is going to impact the entire universe. It's going to shift the world in a certain direction. That would indeed arouse a certain awe. But it seems, what would that arouse? What would that awe inspire? Like we said earlier, it would inspire us to make sure we don't do the wrong thing. But how does that inspire us to do good? Why do we need fear to do good? Bringing it into human relationships. When we are in a relationship with a person, so what inspires us to give to that person, to look after them, to dote over them, to go out of our way for them, to make their life happy and pleasurable and good? That is love. That's what love is. If a person says they love somebody, but they don't do for them, they don't do anything for them, that's not really love. Love has to be expressed. Now, maybe sometimes we express our love in a way that's not the way the person who receives it wants to receive it. There are different ways of expressing love. There are different languages of love. And so sometimes we could be giving, but the person doesn't really get it because that's not the type of thing that they need to receive. Okay, that's true. But if you do nothing for another person, you can't say that you love them. Love inspires giving and doing. But love will not necessarily stop you from doing the wrong thing. Loving a person will not necessarily stop you from sometimes hurting them, insulting them, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, neglecting what you were supposed to do. Love will not be enough. You can have a person who truly does love you, but they still forget what you asked them to do for you. They truly love, but like it slipped their mind. That can be. Or they forgot that you told them that you don't like it when they do this, and they do it again. If you love me, don't you listen to what I said? Yes, but I forgot that annoys you. That love does not necessarily get us to not slip up. For that, you need something else. For that, you need respect. That if I love you but I don't respect you, so then what that means is that your opinion is actually not so important to me. If I don't respect you, it means I don't really see you as an independent entity, as a voice, as a being worthy of listening to. but I love you. I still love you. Is that possible? Can I really say I love you and I don't respect you?
Yes.
Signifies danger.
What do I mean? I love you but I don't respect you? What does that mean? I mean, obviously, we'd probably not say that, but in actions, could there be somebody who they're loving you but they're not respecting you?
Yeah, if you're a teenager, you act out against your parents, that's an example of loving someone that respects them, so I guess you can.
The teenager loves their parents but doesn't respect them.
If they misbehave and do what the parent doesn't want them to do, then that's disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
But they still love them.
Okay. So they're being disrespectful, they don't respect their parents, but I still love my parents very much, I just don't listen to them. Yeah, that's a good example.
I was going to say different levels of love and there's loving behaviour and there's non-loving behaviour, but you can still love someone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe on the one extreme it would be a sort of what we maybe call more an ideal, but unconditional love on
Mm-hmm.
the one hand, and then on the other hand it's love that, and we're talking here about this, either you become conditional and then
Yeah.
you restrict love or whatever in order to kind of create fear of that. But
Mm-hmm.
But very often a teenager lashes out at a parent, and when they're lashing out, a kid will say, I hate you.
Yeah.
While they're lashing out, they will say, I hate you.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, we know we have to get over that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what a kid says in that heightened
Yeah.
emotion of
Yeah.
when
Correct.
everything is wrong and they're doing the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's sometimes out of great love as well.
Yeah.
That hatred. But what in a relationship between equals? Meaning not child parent, but in a romantic relationship. Can you have love without respect? Why not?
I mean, I was thinking of the former example where you could have love but not respect, maybe as a parent-child, but like as an equal adult, maybe you could have like a lower level of love that doesn't have respect attached to it, but respect doesn't mean you have to agree with someone either, but
Right. So obviously we're not saying we're not questioning whether this will be a lasting or successful relationship. But can somebody say, you don't respect me, and the response say, you're right, but I love you. Why?
I just think people can do all sorts of actions, like say on a really extreme level, if the person you were in a relationship with committed a crime, okay?
Yeah.
And there's, we can think very small things, but let's make it big. You wouldn't respect the crime, but it wouldn't mean you suddenly don't love them anymore.
Okay.
You would still love them because that's your heart,
Mm-hmm.
but you would be maybe repulsed or in disbelief and certainly disrespecting the lack of integrity or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is.
Yep, for sure.
Someone putting their own selfish needs before the other person,
Mm-hmm.
no regard for their feelings whatsoever,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
if you love someone, how can you hurt them and make them feel
Right.
bad?
Right. So it's a horrible situation to be in, where if you love someone, don't respect them, then that person's not really being treated as an equal or as a valued human being. Not sustainable. I would say that's all true, but even not looking at such extreme or dramatic circumstances, I think sometimes all of us could be somewhat guilty of this. That loving and not respecting, obviously there are extremes, there's black and white type of cases of this, but I'm talking about more subtle cases that in some ways we do this all the time. Loving, for most people, I would say, is easier than respecting. For most people. Many people it's the other way around, but for many people, to love would be easier than to respect. Because loving is my feeling good towards you. You make me feel good. Respecting is allowing you to be regardless of me. That the loving feeling is that I'm attracted to you, I like being around you, I like you being in my life, you add something to me, and so there is quite a bit of my subjective experience there. Respect is saying that you are a valid human being regardless of me, nothing to do with me. Without me in your life, you have value. But I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that you're a valued being apart from me. That's for many more challenging and takes a bit more work. It would be for a lot of people easier to love someone and easy to neglect the respect for the person. Going back to children. Children are naturally self-absorbed beings. They see themselves as being self, and they don't really see other people as existing other than in their lives. We've spoken about this before when a child sees their kindergarten teacher at the supermarket. It's like shock. It's like, what are you doing here? Like, I left you at the classroom. I come in the morning, that's where you are. What are you doing outside of that scenario? Because the kid really thinks that they're part of the furniture in the kindergarten, which is where I come, and that's where I see you. And children think that the whole world is just the sort of background of their life, and it stops when I'm not there. There's nothing happening. They're just waiting for me to arrive. That's a child's view of the world. We don't always necessarily graduate from that view. We sort of continue with that view of the world that there's our life and everyone else is sort of playing in the background of our life. That when I'm not there, they're just waiting for me to be there. That's our natural state, being ego beings. We see ourselves first and we see others as in the background of that. So it's very easy in a relationship to see a person as being this person who's there to make me feel good. Making them feel good and giving to them also makes me feel good. That's what love is. So it's not that we're not talking about a totally egomaniac person who just uses other people. We're not talking about to that extreme. We're talking about we normal people who have egos and who will do things that make us feel good, including giving and being nice and being kind, because that also makes us feel good. But it's not easy to go out of that and to say, but there are things that are nothing to do with me that deserve to be done as well. There's goodness, there's giving that's not for me, not for my fulfillment, not for what I'll get back, that is purely for an other. That's not so simple. That's not so easy for us to do. And I'm talking about good people. I'm not talking about rotten people. Good, nice people. It's easy to do niceness and to do good that is your nature, is that feels right for you. But to actually respect another person, and meaning see them as a separate entity who has a life of their own, that's not just in context of my relationship with them, and therefore they have needs that I wouldn't guess. That's much harder than it sounds. To actually really hear what another person is saying is a great challenge, because everything we hear, we filter according to how I think. How many misunderstandings do we have with people who we're close with? But I told you this. No, you didn't. You didn't tell me that. If we could record everything, I mean, now we can. If we could have everything on CCTV, every conversation, and then when we're having an argument, saying, but you never told me. But I did tell you. No, you told. Okay, let's watch. So do you know what will happen? We'll see that even on the original CCTV footage, okay, but the way you said it didn't make it clear to me that that's what you meant. I understood it this way. Because everything we hear is filtered through how we think it should be. And so, I love you, and therefore, I think this is what's good for you. If I love you, should I not give you what I think is good for you? And even if you told me that something else is good for you, but I understood what you meant was what I understood what you meant. And so you could be very giving and very loving, but not respecting, meaning not really seeing the other as an other that is totally independent, has their own way of thinking, and maybe it's not what you thought. So in a way, respecting is harder, because respecting is taking myself out of the picture and honoring you as a real being. And for that reason, respecting is necessary, not just so I don't hurt you, but also so I know how to love you, so I know what to give you. Because certainly respecting a person means I don't want to step on your toes, I don't want to crush you, I don't want to do things and say things that will knock you sideways. I want you to be on your feet. I want you to have an opinion, to be able to express yourself. I want you to be able to be, which means that I'll put myself out of the way. I'll hold myself back. I won't do things that will hurt you. But to really be able to give to you, I also need to respect you, because I need to really hear who you are, what you want. So that's what Tanya means here when Rabbi Shneur Zalman says that you need fear to do good. Not just to avoid evil, but to do good. In order to really be doing good, not what I feel like, but what you need, I need to have the awe, the fear, the respect, the allowing you to have space. This is true in interpersonal, and it's true with God as well. If we just have love for God, but not fear of Him, so then love will make us do good, but it won't stop us from doing the wrong thing. But even in our doing good, it won't be fully good. Because if you don't really see it as doing good for God, if you don't see God as being a real being that you have awe of, then it's just you, just your love, just what you want to give. It's not actually listening to what He has asked you to do. So you may think you're doing lots of good, but that's good that you want to do, as opposed to good that God is asking you to do. To clarify this a bit further, and understand how we can skip from fear to awe to respect and use these words interchangeably, I want to share with you an interesting analysis that I once had. This is a quote from a previous chapter of Tanya, chapter 28. In chapter 28, he talks about elevating emotions. He says the following: don't be a fool to attempt to elevate that aspect of your personality from which this extraneous thought extends. Talking there about bad thoughts that come to our mind that come, he explains, through our negative emotions. We're not perfect people. Because we have ugliness in our hearts, sometimes ugly thoughts pop into our head. What should we do with these ugly thoughts? So he says, push them aside. Don't engage with them. And don't try to elevate them. Don't try to elevate negative, ugly thoughts. That is a technique meant only for tzaddikim, the righteous, who do not have distracting thoughts falling into their minds from their own character. If such a thought occurs to them, it belongs to someone else. But when it's your own thoughts falling into your mind, from the negative aspect of your heart, from the left ventricle, how are you supposed to pull something up when you yourself are the one who is tied down? Very interesting thing. What he's saying here is that we've discussed many times that thoughts pop into our head. We don't have control over thoughts that pop into our head. We have control over if we entertain the thought, but we don't have control over what pops into our head. The nicest, most clean-cut person who wants to do the right thing, walking down the street very innocently, an ugly thought can pop into your head. An urge, a desire, something that's immoral, lowly. You're not doing anything about it, but it popped into your head. This can happen not just when you're walking down the street, it can happen in the middle of prayer. You're sitting in synagogue, a holy place, in the middle of prayer, and an ugly desire pops into your head. This is a sign that you're not a tzaddik, that you're not a completely pure soul, because pure souls don't have these thoughts. But it's not a sign that you're a lowly, disgusting being. It's that you're not perfect. And therefore, says Tanya, don't worry about these thoughts. They're just there to try and drag you down. Just push it aside. Don't engage in it. Just push it aside. Now then he says here, but you might think, well, hang on a minute. Why push it aside? Maybe I should engage in it and elevate it. Meaning, he's referring here to a Kabbalistic idea that every thought has some holy source. It's a fallen angel. It's a spark of goodness that has fallen into impurity. Maybe what I should do is not push it away, but turn it around. Take it, find where it comes from, what's its source, and connect it to its source. It says the Baal Shem Tov taught an idea that when somebody has, let's say, a lowly sexual desire, that is coming from a very high place. It's coming from a desire for love, but it's in a corrupt form. It's in a fallen form. So if you have a sudden urge, a sexual urge that is inappropriate, so why ignore it? Why push it aside? Why not lift it up to its real source and say, do you know what this is? It's a search for love. It's a fascinating idea. The Baal Shem Tov says that all of the lowliness in this world has holy source. So when people are running around in promiscuous relationships, there's a very holy search for true love there. It's just corrupted. They just don't translate it. They don't know what they're really looking for. So they're looking for love in the lowliest, cheapest places. Really, they're searching for divine love. They're looking for God. It's just fallen love. Because everything in this world has a holy source. So maybe, says Rabbi Zalman, you'll think, in my prayers, if I have such a thought, I should say, this thought is actually a part of my prayer. It's not against my prayer, it's a part of my prayer. My prayer is searching for a connection with God. And this thought, this ugly thought, is actually just a corrupt form of that. So let me meditate on the thought and retrace it back to its holy source. I'm not looking for a cheap relationship. I'm looking for the depth of love of God. Says Rabbi Zalman, don't be a fool and do that, because you're not up to that. That's something that a tzaddik can do. Why? Because a tzaddik doesn't have those thoughts. And if a tzaddik would have such a thought, he knows it's not his. It's somebody else's thoughts. A tzaddik can pick up the wavelengths of other people's thoughts. And so sometimes somebody else's thought pops into his mind and he elevates their thought. Because a tzaddik would never have such a thought. But you could have such a thought. It's not out of the question that such a thing could pop into your mind. That's sort of where you are, and so you can't elevate something. When you're stuck down here, you can't elevate it. A tzaddik who's on a high, he's beyond that. So someone who's beyond it can elevate. But when you're in it, you can't elevate. So when the Baal Shem Tov describes elevating these lowly carnal thoughts to their holy source, he's talking to tzaddikim, to people who don't have these thoughts on their own. But people like us who do, we can't elevate them, so we have to push them aside.
Who determines tzaddik?
Well, earlier in Tanya we said that even if you think you're a tzaddik, you shouldn't. Everyone says you're a tzaddik, you should think you're not a tzaddik. But I guess a tzaddik means somebody who has no urge to do evil. So not only they don't do evil, they don't have an urge to do evil. So a tzaddik will know that a thought like this is so foreign to them, they just don't recognize it. It's not. They don't have any connection to it. It pops outside of them. Whereas somebody who has these thoughts all the time, we know we're not a tzaddik. We're not supposed to be a tzaddik. We're supposed to be a struggler, battling with these thoughts. But we're nowhere near a tzaddik. They're few and far between. So this. In this quote from earlier in Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman is very clear about don't be a fool and engage in such a thing. Now I remember studying this, and many years ago I came across a quote from another Hasidic master that seemed to contradict this. This was from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov was a great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. He had a daughter called Odel, who had a daughter called Feiga, who had a son called Nachman. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, a great Hasidic master. He was a contemporary of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the Alter Rebbe of Tanya, and they had very high regard for each other. And they wrote their ideas and their different schools of Hasidic thought. In Rabbi Nachman's great work called Likutei Moharan, he says the following idea. You need to elevate the emotion of fear to its source. If a person is scared of something, be it a policeman or a thief or any other fear, it is because divine fear has clothed itself in that object. Because nothing else is a true source of fear other than God. So you need to meditate on the source of the fear and elevate it upwards to be a fear of God. Meaning, here he's talking about you're scared of something. You're lying about at night and you think you heard a noise. And you're scared, or you're walking down the street, or whatever it is, you're scared of something. So elevate that emotion of fear to be fear of God, because really nothing is scary. There is nothing to fear in the world. Only God is awesome, is an object of fear. Nothing else really is scary. And the only reason why you're scared of something is because there's a spark of godly fear that is in that thing. So if someone is scary, or if something is scaring you, that is a fallen experience of divine fear that you have to lift up to its source. He's saying that because fear of God is something that is quite inaccessible, to fear God, well, how do I do that? What do I do? But to be scared of some thief, or in Russia in those times a policeman, would be equally fearful. So that's a very accessible fear. God, fear of God is abstract, but fear of a thief breaking into your house, that's real. So if you have a feeling of fear, don't push it away. Embrace that feeling, but lift it to its source, to a fear of God, because He's the ultimate source of fear. Which, interestingly, this teaching of Rabbi Nachman shows us that fear or respect, they're all the same thing. Being scared is actually really being in awe of God, because nothing else is really scary. There's nothing really to be scared of. Ultimately, everything is in God's hands. So, what are you scared of? Like the Baal Shem Tov said that when he was a young boy, his father took him out into the forest and told him that you should not fear anything but God. And the howling and the noises and whatever you hear, there's nothing to be scared of. You should only fear God. Meaning that there's only one type of fear, and that's fear of God. There's a corrupted version of it, and that is being scared of howling wolves. So when you experience fear of something, elevate that emotion to be a fear of God. Take it to its source, where it really belongs. So I remember coming across this many years ago and thinking, okay, is this a contradiction between the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman and the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov? Perhaps this is a difference of opinion. They're different schools of Hasidic thought. Rabbi Shneur Zalman in Tanya says, don't be a fool to elevate emotions. That's for tzaddikim. Tzaddikim can do that because they're above this stuff. But we who are not above negative or lowly emotions can't elevate them. It's not our mission. Rabbi Nachman writes, without qualifying his statement that it's only for tzaddikim, he says that you should elevate your emotion. If you have a fear of a thief, elevate that to fearing God. Even if you're not a tzaddik, you can do that. That's what it seems.
Doesn't each and every one of us, even if we have lowly common thoughts, have an inner tzaddik part to us?
True, it's true. We have an inner tzaddik. True, but Rabbi Shneur Zalman's comment was that you can't, the end there, he says you can't pull something up when you're tied down. You have a tzaddik part of you, but you have the other part of you as well. And so you can't, you need a tzaddik to lift you out. You need someone who's out of the pit to lift you out of the pit. Whereas Rabbi Nachman says, no, you do it. You're scared of a thief, elevate that to fear of God. Even though I'm a person who could be scared of a thief, I'm not a tzaddik who fears nothing but God himself. So is this a difference in philosophy, or is there a way to reconcile the two? I had the opportunity to ask this question to a very interesting person. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter. This is a picture of him. He is a teacher in Jerusalem of Breslov, a Breslov teacher. Now this is a recent picture of him. He's 83 years old. He doesn't look it. And when I saw him, it was 20 or so years ago, and he looked even younger, even though he was then already in his 60s. He always has this amazingly young look, and now he's in his 80s and he still looks this way. He's an amazing character, very very deep mind, a great teacher, and a very very holy soul. He also he's written books. One has been translated into English. And he's also known for having what's called Chachmas Hayad. He has the power to read hands, to read palms. Reading palms is something that there is in Jewish writings a lot about it, that there are Jewish sources on it. It could be. He had all the wisdoms. So yeah, it's called a chachma. It's a wisdom. It's something that you can learn. It's not a mystical power. It's a wisdom that can be studied and learned. It's spoken about in the Zohar. He is known to have chachmas hayad, the ability to read palms from the Jewish angle. And I went to speak to him and to get a blessing from him. I didn't ask for my palm to be read, but he asked to look at my hand. And maybe one other time I'll tell you what he said. But I went to him for a blessing and to speak to him and to meet him in his Jerusalem home. Anyone can go and see him any time. And I asked him this question. I said that studying Tanya, I saw Rabbi Shneur Zalman says, don't be a fool to try and elevate emotions, because if you're not a tzaddik, you're not above it, you can't do that. Rabbi Nachman, on the other hand, I see says that if you're scared of something, elevate that emotion to fearing God. Seemingly to everyone. Is he talking to everyone? Is this a difference of opinion, or can we reconcile the two? The answer he gave me was very interesting. He said, no, it's not a contradiction. They both agree with each other. He said, one is talking about love, the other one's talking about fear. When it comes to love, only a tzaddik can elevate a corrupted love to holy love. But when it comes to fear, anyone can elevate fear from an unholy or lowly version to its holy source. And he said the reason is because the nature of love is that it is about me and my feeling. And so therefore if I am not completely pure and holy, so I'm stuck in that love, the corrupted love, I can't elevate that. But fear by its nature is an experience of self-nullification. It's not so much about me. The whole thing is it's not about me. It's about the object that I'm fearing, not the subject, not me. Therefore, because it's not so much about my ego, in fact, the opposite, it's the nullification of my ego, so therefore I can elevate a lower version, fear of a thief, to the higher source, to fear of God. Which was a fascinating thought, a fascinating idea, that because love is about my feeling, it's about me feeling good. So therefore, if I'm not a pure being, my love is not always pure. So I can't manipulate that. I can't play with a lowly, corrupted version of love and elevate it to holiness. On that, Rabbi Shneur Zalman says, don't be a fool. You're not a tzaddik, you're not holy, so therefore this love, this lowly love that you have, a lowly attraction or thought or urge that you have, is lowly. You can't elevate that, you're stuck in that. You have to push it away. And so a corrupt form of love, you have to avoid it at all costs. Don't entertain that emotion. Don't try and enter into it and elevate it, because you're just going to be pulled down. You're not above it. Because love is you experiencing it. There's ego there, there's you there. That's what it's supposed to be. Whereas fear is a negation of self. I lose myself. I'm in awe of the other being, and it's not about me, it's about you. Therefore, if I'm in awe, if I'm scared, if I have fear of noises in the night, so then why waste my fear on that? I can stop and say, no, I'm going to fear God, because there's not so much me in it in the first place. So therefore, even though I'm not so holy, but I can redirect my fear to a higher fear. I can't do that with my love, because I'm stuck in that love. There's more me in it. But in fear there isn't. It's not so much about me. And that's the core here, what Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying in our chapter 41, and that is that this has to be the basis of our service of God. This has to be the basis of all of our relationships. It has to be the fear or respect. It has to be sensing the other, the otherness of the other. In the case of our human relationships, the base of the relationship has to be respecting that you are a real being. Before we talk about love, before I have love for you, before we discuss our love, we first have to establish respect, which is that you are a real person, you are a worthy being, you have your own life, your own identity, your own existence, and that deserves respect. That has to be number one. Then we can talk about how I can love you and you can love me. But the first has to be respect. I don't mean first in chronological order, but in hierarchy, respect is the foundation. If there's love and there's not respect, so then that's going to be a mess. You're just an extension of my ego. It's just what I feel. But if there's respect and love with that, so then the love is aimed correctly. It's I'm loving someone because you're really there. It's not just about me. And when it comes to our relationship with God, it's the same thing. That if there's love for God, I love God, and I want to be connected to God. That yearning is beautiful, but it has to be founded on an awe, a respect of His existence. The good that I do has to be what God wants me to do, not what I feel like expressing, but what God actually wants me to do. What does He ask from me? What does He expect from me? It has to be on His terms, not just my terms. can't just be me expressing my soul. It has to be me doing what he has asked me to do. Basing it on awe of his existence. Being in awe of his existence. Because love is still me. But awe or fear or respect is much more about the other. So I had the opportunity, after having this conversation several years later, to discuss it with a teacher of Chabad thought, to see this is how a Breslover answers the question. In Chabad thinking, is there room for that? I asked one of my teachers, Rabbi Shalom Chartanov, a great scholar of Chabad thought, and I described my interaction with Rabbi Yaakov Shechter, and he said, yep, there's something in that. It definitely does reconcile the two teachings very beautifully. So, this is just a quote from a totally different discipline that puts it in more modern terms. This guy, I just came across this person, Aaron Ben Zev. He's a professor of philosophy at University of Haifa, not a religious person, I don't believe. He studies relationships and human relationships from a psychological and philosophical point of view. And in his study of respect and love and their place in relationships, he has a whole thesis on this as well, how respect is the basis of a relationship. And he just defines it in words that sound very familiar now. Respect is more object-generated than subject-generated. It is something that is claimed from us in light of the object's characteristics. Attraction and liking are more subject-generated than object-generated. Although both are based upon the object's characteristics, they're based even more on the subject's taste. So, again, respect is object-generated, meaning if I respect you, it's you that are generating the respect. I'm having the respect for you, but it's about you, meaning you have a real existence. You deserve your space. So it's not about my feelings towards you, it's your effect on me. You, the object, are generating the respect. It's claimed from me because of you. Because you have characteristics that are respectable, I respect you. But attraction and liking, that's more about me. Even though I'm attracted to you, to your characteristics. But the emphasis is my experience of them, my attraction towards them. So love is me and what I feel about you. Respect is what you make me feel. What you claim from me, what you deserve from me. And that is exactly what Rabbi Yaakov Shechter was saying, that while fear is a self-negating experience, what we said is kivutz halev, the shriveling of the heart. It's not about me, it's about you. So therefore, fear is the basis of our relationship with God and with other human beings. So to conclude, to be in awe, to be in love. You have to be in awe to be in love. Love is an expression of what you want. Respect opens you to what someone else wants. Love is not all you need. Love without awe is selfish, because it's what I feel. The awareness that God is watching you is the first step to doing good. Without it, we do what we feel like, not always what we should be doing. This is the one good fear that all other fears imitate. That the fear of doing the wrong thing, because we're in awe of God, that is a good fear. That's where fear is good. All other fears, whenever we're scared of anything, it's just a corrupt version, it's a lower version of true fear, which is the fear to not be doing the right thing in the eyes of God. And that is the foundation of everything. Okay, I'll stop there. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
What about someone who doesn't experience awe of God or belief in God? Where does that leave them in relation to fear?
Well, I guess it's the same thing, that if we see belief in God as being my opinion about God, it's like, we're being interviewed, so So what do you think about God? I think he exists, or I think he doesn't exist. If that's what belief is, so then if I don't believe, I don't believe. Like I'm a bit stuck. Like you can't have a relationship with a being that you don't believe in. But if belief in God is actually not so much about me, that's about God. It's my what is being like in the words of that Aaron Ben Zev here. It's what's being claimed from us in light of the object's characteristics. Belief is not so much. It's not your opinion. We're not taking a survey. Belief is that God exists, I exist, and there are means to connect to a being that are beyond my rationale. That's what belief is. So that type of belief you can enter into even if you're not convinced. Putting it differently, the way we've structured love and fear, or respect is object generated and love is subject generated. So you can look at belief the two ways as well. Is belief subject generated, my opinion? So is that based on my brain, the books that I've read, the influences I've had? That's where belief comes from. Or is belief object generated? That it's God's presence in my life. It's not about me. It's about God. So then my mind is maybe not convinced. I have doubts. That's fine, but that doesn't impact God's existence. Like he exists. So you got to respect that. So I think the conversation can begin even when somebody says, "Well, I don't believe." Okay, which belief we're talking about? Okay. Yeah.
What does it tie in as well with fear of death?
Well, I guess fear of death is a fear of self-negation. It's fear of not being. That's really what it boils down to. That I'm not going to be, and so which is only true if that's what death means. If death means you're not going to be, so then I've got something to worry about. It's interesting that we don't find an embracing of death in the Jewish or the mystical tradition, like seeking it or wanting it, or we very much embrace life, but not because we're not out of a fear of death, but out of a love or a cherishing of life. And so, if we cherish life and we don't want death, that's a good place to be. But fear of death that like paralyzes us from living, that's just misunderstanding what life is. So we cherish life, but death is not it's not the negation of self. It's not the end.
So it requires understanding what death is.
Yeah.
In order to accept
Yeah,
life.
but I think so. Perspective that death is moving to another life. It's unknown. I mean, there's the fear of unknown with that. That's understandable, but it's not the end of self. It's the continuation of a higher journey. If a baby in a womb would be asked, "You ready to leave?" they would say, "No way! Like, where am I going? What's out there?" That would be a fearsome experience as well. But that's birth. So death is the same. Okay. So there, God willing, continue next week.